backstage. Woo! Happy Friday. Okay, yes, welcome back. We are happy to have you back with us. This week, we are talking about a topic that kind of came about as a result of one of the discussions we had last week. We were talking about, that's what it's called, the hunter-gatherer managers. The managers who both lead and kind of do the work with you. And it just kind of made me realize a lot of people kind of come to me in DMs and stuff during meetings, like in Slack or like after, and they're like, I was going to say this, but I didn't want to. And I'm like, why? You should say it. And I'm like, a lot of us, being women in particular, when we're in certain meetings or in with certain audiences, we are like deathly afraid to speak up or share our ideas or participate. And so I thought today would be a fun topic to explore what managers, leaders, team leads can do to help encourage women's success and empowerment on their teams and in the workplace. So that's where it came from. Initial impressions, what do you guys think?
I mean, I'm super excited for this topic, mostly because I spent I would say the beginning of me, like, believe it or not, guys, I didn't always have it this put together. No, we know that's a joke, but I'm just right. But I'm just saying, I think in the beginning of my career, I was like very timid, very shy, very introverted. And then, as time went on, I kind of just started fighting for the people, right? I'm like, okay, I never want somebody to feel the way I did. So now I kind of get ahead of it, right? In my most Meryl of ways, right? So I'm like, I'll raise my hand, I'll do the thing so that nobody else has to, kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's a great topic. I'm excited for this one.
I'm excited for this topic because being in sales for, 12 years in this industry and then in other industries, there's a lot of ways that leadership can include women in multiple facets of the business.
Yeah. And I feel like part of the flack we're going to get for this topic is like, why do women deserve and need special treatment? Why do we have to like pay attention to you specifically? And it's honestly because of conditioning, right? Like certain people are conditioned to believe that if they speak up, they won't be shot down if they're wrong, or like they're empowered to feel emboldened, right? To make those contributions. But women often it's like, didn't you just get here? What do you know about this? Da, da, da. Like I've personally been dressed down in meetings and seen more women dressed down in meetings than I have men. That's just my point of view. I don't know if that's true for everybody here, but yeah. True. So I think it is an important topic to address. So what would that mean to you guys? What would it look like to you? What situations have you found yourself in where like someone could have reached across some lines to like help you out or encourage you? What would that have looked like? And what would you have liked to have seen?
I'll go first. I would say this, and I mean this in like the least cocky way. I wish somebody would do for me what I'm trying to do for others, right? So, and there's not a lot of that goes on because I think, so I play both sides, right? I feel like on this podcast, I'm usually I'll play Sweden or Switzerland, if you will, right? And play both sides. There was something that was said, I did a vision board with my mom over the weekend, right? And she kind of mentioned something that really almost goes against the opposite of what we're saying, but it was like, we encourage, like, there's not many vision boards that I've seen, because she's like a VP and runs a whole organization. It's like, there's not much of this that we do for men because we just assume that they show up ready, right? So we assume that they know their goals because they've been emboldened and empowered since they were young, and girls don't usually get that. So usually girls get like the vision board, right? But on the flip side though, I do think because of that, we just kind of assume, right, that, and this isn't all the time, but we do assume that like, the male comes in and he's like, oh, I already know what to do. I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I've got it going on. And so we kind of almost refer to them. There were times in my career where I didn't work with a lot of women. And usually, ironically, in my career, I want to get your guys' take on this too. There wasn't always this like sisterhood, right? It was almost like, hey, there's another woman here. It's kind of competition. Like I worked really hard to get here. I don't know you so much. So like, I'm going to kind of take all the thing and not help because I'm afraid that maybe you'll take over for me kind of thing. Right. So there were times where I did have somebody in a male role kind of reach out and go, do you have what you need? And I'm like, that's kind of like the whatever way of asking. Like, I don't want to say like crappy way of asking, but it's not empowering. It's still asking like, how can I help you? But I do wish that people would do some of the stuff that I do, which is like, you kind of read the room and see, you know what, I kind of gauge that some people are feeling a little bit less confident about this. Why don't I be the dumb person to ask the question, right? On behalf of everybody else, even if I know the answer. That way, like I'm kind of willing to make myself look like I know less to help us all learn more, if that makes sense. So that's what I wish would happen a lot more often than not.
So this is going to sound kind of double-sided here. So I wish that leadership would not act like they have to walk on eggshells around me because I'm a woman. So in sales, there's a lot of men, and a particular employer that I worked for before I was hired, the VP told all of my male counterparts, we can't say these type of words when she comes on board. We can't talk like this. We can't do this. So there's a legal perspective that I understand, but at the same time, I'm being viewed as differently as a woman because you can't say balls, or like you can't talk about football. And this is a lot of the
Sports
things that
metaphor.
happen in sales, because it's you're a relationship builder, right? And I'm not saying I want people to be disrespectful, but they do exclude the women from the conversation a lot of times, but they also feel like they have to walk on eggshells. So I see both sides of it because of the climate and the legal and political climates. I get that, but I wish that they wouldn't feel like they have to do that, because I make it known that you don't have to change who you are. I get out legally, if you say certain things, you can't, but I'm not any different than them. I could be one of the guys too.
Yeah.
I don't feel like they're trying to include me, but by trying to include me, they're being exclusive.
Yeah. It's almost like patronizing, like, oh, well,
Right.
hold on. Let me explain this for you, Amber, since I'm sure you don't know sports metaphors. I'm like, I totally know sports. First of all, I love sports. So, you know what I mean?
I know sports things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like a little bit, it's like, where's the line, right? And I hope that on today's episode, we can kind of help people who are listening that are like, I'm the person that wants to learn how to empower, the females on my team. How do I do that without doing what Erica's saying, right? Like without.
Yeah.
I'm
going to play devil's advocate a little bit, because why not? So I see where they're coming from when they're like, let's try to be a little more considerate of these things. If we had a certain culture before where we all kind of bro out and we're all good with a certain level of sense of humor, and we don't know how that person's going to be coming in. And to your benefit, that means they hired you based on your capabilities and not strictly because you get down with their sense of humor. But I mean, in the military, we just treat everybody the same. You come into a new shop, it's like, this is how we've been. You assimilate or you don't want to. You participate or you don't want to. It's up to you. Like, I get where he was coming from, and like, let's try to be considerate, but you're kind of ostracizing that person even more. You're setting that person up to be the reason things had to change, right? Like, oh, this chick came on board and now we got to curb all the stuff where you, it's like, I think it's maybe, and again, I think it never hurts to ask. Kind of like with the whole pronouns thing, right? Like, you never want to look insensitive because you expect yourself to know everybody's pronouns. It's like, you don't know. You have no idea. You're never going to offend me by saying, how would you like to be referred to? That's a nice way to ask. Like, but don't dance around it either and be like,
yeah, exactly. I would say the best leaders I've had are the ones that do it without you noticing that they're doing it, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a mix of both worlds, right? Like, you come in and you're like, hey, we got a new person on the team, and it's almost like you don't have to say like, stop acting like this in front of her. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do that. It's just kind of, you're such a great leader that you've already set the stage for what's acceptable. So when they come in, it's kind of like, you can almost read the room and you're making adjustments, but nobody really knows it. You know what I mean? Like, it's obvious that you have to like point it out, ask questions, or be like, this person needs to, be tiptoed around, just so you guys know, like, horrible leadership, right? So you should be able to do this kind of, like in a Don Draper way. And that's probably the worst analogy I can make, but in like a smooth kind of classy
total chauvinist.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But like, not the chauvinist, but you know what I mean? I think
with the charisma.
Yeah. Just like the smoothness, right? Like, you're just doing it without even trying, kind of thing like that. And that's what we can talk about more here too.
I think you can ask something with like a motive, obviously, or you can just ask for business purposes. Like, hey, everybody, Erica's on board. She's new. Erica, by the way, pronouns, she, her. Okay, great. Moving on. Like, it's not like, and do you want to be called she, her? It's like, it's a totally different way of asking. Do we need to stop that? Does this bother you?
Right now? Yeah, exactly.
Well, they use the word, does this offend you, a lot. And that offends me, that they ask me if I'm offended, because you're assuming already that, I'll be offended. And this isn't to rant on managers, because they're in a very tough position. And I see,
and they're trying. Yeah.
And they are trying. And most of them are pretty good about it. I just think that they really don't know how. That's why this conversation is so great, because maybe we can, give people some advice on this.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping. So to go back and answer my original question that I asked you. Wait, Erica, do you have an example where someone could have reached out to you and given you that support that you needed? Specific example.
I really wish that my first vendor job, the manager would have my direct manager would have reached out and asked me, you know, it would have reached out and helped me when I came onto the vendor side. So I was on the reseller side and then I went to the vendor side, and it was even more bro culture back when I started on the vendor side. I wish that he kind of would have enabled me to not feel like I was like excluded on an island here, because I did feel very excluded. And I'm not saying he didn't include me, but I was kind of on my little island, and they would go to like strip clubs and bars and stuff like that, just wasn't a right place for me. So I wish he would have kind of changed that for me and, given me some advice on how to navigate that better versus like figuring it out myself.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those, like, they want to see the chops. And we've talked about toxicity between women. It's not necessary. We don't need it. And we've talked about, sensitive and insensitive ways to approach things. But I think, treat it like OSINT, like an information gathering session. Something that someone did for me when I was brand new, and like I was just sitting in meetings, like just writing things down again in context, so I could know how to Google them later, right? Like, and I was not keeping up at all. Someone said to me, "Hey, if you don't want to speak up in the meeting, write down all your questions." This was a gentleman. "Write down all of your questions in the meeting. Come to me after, and we will do a little deep dive on what we were talking about." And I was like, "Yes, that's what I need. Thank you." Yeah. He's like, "But if you do feel comfortable," he's like, "or you can," because we had like inter-office chat still, we all had our laptops. He's like, "You can ping me and I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that for you." And I was like, "Oh, I normally do that for other people." Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like go ahead.
I also wish, when I've seen it and I still see it, a woman will make a recommendation in a meeting or speak up and it's kind of like blown over, but then a guy will say it in a different way, but it's the same question or statement. And then they're like, "Oh my gosh, that's great," or "Great question." And that's not to bash on either gender, but I wish that there were more men that would stand up in that situation and be like, "Hey, she just said that," or, ask that question.
Crazy though. I'm going to speak for this, right? Because Erica, you've been on the sales side. I've been on both. This kind of stuff only happens on the sales side. I'm telling you, yes. Engineering, I've never seen, like, it's almost like we're doing like old news right now for like the engineering side, because I feel like a lot of engineers, male, female, whatever it is, I feel like there's so much support now around this. And it's kind of like it's like the military. You like walk in and you're like, yeah, you're one of us now. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're one of the guys, you're one of the girls, like you're one of us. And I feel like this stuff that you talk about, and it's so funny because you get on here and the whole world is like, oh my gosh, like, where is Erica working that all this stuff is happening? And it's like, it's called sales, right? And it's like, it's just like, it's such a different environment. I'm telling you, it's almost like I went back in time 10 years when I became a salesperson. I'm like, what? Like,
great
it's
point.
Wild that you guys say this and do this, and just, it's interesting.
Yeah. Some verticals are in the inclusivity and diversity freaking dark ages still. Like, they have not joined up with even the 16th century, let alone the 23rd century, 22nd, whatever we're in now. Right. I can't math. So,
I can't. Yeah, I've definitely. Sorry, that's why I always state when I say something like that, sorry to cut you off, that I'm on the sales side, just in case people who have not heard our previous episodes. Yeah, I don't want. I don't want it to say cyber overall.
And it's not, because I've every time Erica tells these horror stories, I'm like, wow, I feel so bad. I've never seen that, and I am on the practitioner side. It's like the first time I ever encountered it, she's like, "Hey, you finally got your badge. Welcome." And I was like, that was weird though. That's not my normal experience. Yeah. That's not what I normally see from my peers. Like, I've been on a call where someone goes, "Why don't we da-da-da?" And they go, "Yeah, Tanya brought that up like 5 sessions ago."
Yeah. I also think now that I'm starting to think about it, and I'm not trying to get like all socioeconomics over here, but I'm just saying, like, if you think about each one of those sides of the industry have different goals, right? Like on the engineering practitioner side, you want the team to be a team. You want it to work. You have like this, collective outcome that you're trying to get to. Sales is like very transactional. And like the way you're treated is transactional. Everything you're doing is transactional. The second you've done something great, it's like, who cares? Keep going, right? Like, well, on the engineering side, it's like, oh, you're like a god, like, good job, dude, you made that happen. Like, that was the most kick-ass demo I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? And you're like praised and celebrated because you're like, oh my God, we did it. We made it work and we were able to present it, right? Sales is like, that's great. Keep it going. Why is it so slow? Let's stop talking about this.
You did your job. Do more of your job.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just like a culture of like growth. Whereas I feel like the engineering side is more of like a culture of, what is it, like accuracy, like you're just trying to get it to work and trying to get it to like be what you want it to be. With sales, it's never enough, right? So I feel like that kind of inspires that type of culture to be like, oh my God, why are we talking about like genders and whatever pronouns?
Yeah.
Like, do the sale, just make the money. You know what I mean?
But
And it's
at the management level and executive level in tech, it still is a problem.
Yeah,
too.
I would believe it. We've got a great comment here from Cam Sivesend, and I'm not going to post the whole thing because it's chunky, so I'm going to read it to you instead. So he says, as a male, I think it's important to read the room with anyone, male or female. Know if the person is into sports or not. Understand where they're coming from. He had a boss once who did podcasts, and he would generally use the word guys when referring to just about anyone. I do that a lot too. Also, I'm Californian, so dude is my go-to pronoun, whether or not you're male or female. But he says, but I did tell him to try and avoid that if he can, because it just doesn't sound good or look good. He still does it. So he commends the topic and says they just discussed this. So how do you guys feel about, I just did it. How do you two feel about that? Like when you're generalized guys or anything, does that bother you? Does it?
It doesn't bother me. This does bring up a good topic though, but I will say for this one, I have to get better at this because I started, I would say guys, and it was actually Erica's former boss that would be like, that is not sensitive, or, you know, you're not taking into consideration. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like that's just how I talk. Right. And so I had to change it. And then I would start saying y'all. And then everyone's like, what is wrong with this person? Like, you know, I'm like, hey y'all, like whatever. And so it was kind of like, hi everyone. And it's like, you have to really make that change to be inclusive. And it is important because you never want to offend anybody, whether or not you believe in what they believe in or follow whatever things. It's just good to be respectful all around. But after Erica does her part, I will say that this brings up another thing that I was just going to say.
Can't wait for that.
Doesn't bother me at all, but I've had to, over the years, change my verbiage. I have always used y'all. So for me to say y'all, it's not different, but I had to stop saying dude because I did offend somebody, back in the day, not recently. I was like, dude. And I was like all excited. And she was like, she's transgender. And she was like, please don't call me dude. And I was like, okay, thank you. She said it just really, it really bothers me. And I was like, okay. Noted.
Yeah. And it's one of those things like that's slang that we've used since forever, like because we grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. But like for me, it's like I try not to do that so consciously, but I'll still slip up. And like, you know, we're all humans, we're works in progress. So the fact that we try to not dude, if it's a group of girls, I try to say girls or ladies. If it's a mixed group, I do generalize, but I try to say folks. I use folks a lot. Hey folks. Be graceful with people. Tell people what you want. Yeah. Howdy, folks. Let's just combine both. Yeah, so it doesn't offend me personally, but I know it offends other people. So if you ever guys or dude me, I won't pick up on it. But because it does exclude others, I try to be as generally inclusive as possible. But Amber, what were you going to bring up next?
I was going to say, because all three of us in our responses did say like, it doesn't bother me, but right. And here's the thing. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, a guy, and we were talking about this and I'm like, you know what? I'm used to it. And it's not a good thing. Like it's, how do I put this? It was a very interesting discussion. Like this in itself could be its own podcast topic, but it's like, are we kind of rolling with the punches too much? Are we accepting too much, right? And just thinking about it as normal because we're so used to it, right? Because we don't want to be the problem. Because that is my thing. And I told you guys this before I jumped on. I was like, I never want to be the problem, whether it's on this podcast and my video's weird, whether it's in a meeting and I say the wrong thing, right? Like I never want to be the problem. I always try to like keep myself put together. That's why everybody calls me Sweden, right? Because I don't want to like make waves like that. But at what
I think I've referred to you as Sweden in other conversations at least 6 times.
Right, exactly. Because I'm usually like trying to always just be neutral, right? Like I don't want to be the problem. So the thing is though, is like the problem with not wanting to be the problem is you start to take stuff that you normally wouldn't, shouldn't, you know, all that stuff. And at what point do we say stuff like that, right? Because we're like, it's okay. Like if you call me dude, like whatever, because I'm used to it because that's how I talk and that's fine. But it's like, is that just conditioning of us going, oh, at one point that wasn't okay, but I just went with it because it was better than standing up for myself,
like,
right?
So, are we speaking for all the other women they would have referred to and like they're trying to make a conscious change? We're like, don't worry about it. Go back to your old programming.
You're like, am I the problem there now? Because I'm not, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's a tough thing to kind of deal with. But I think from a leadership perspective, like we've all said on this call, like the best ones are the ones that go to bat for us and kind of do it without it being obvious, without pointing us out, without being like, hey guys, we need to be more inclusive because, you know, Amber over here, you know, whatever. It's just like, they kind of just do it and they're smooth about it and they've got your back silently. I think it's like a silent like sidekick or partner or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I feel about it. Those are the best ones.
I have no problem speaking up and correcting somebody. I don't like
No.
dude is okay, but I will like in the beginning of my career in tech, I got like hey dear a lot, and I would tell them, do not address me by that. Address me by Erica or Miss Eakins. Because that leads into other things potentially, which I've experienced in my life, not just in the industry. And then you get into whole other legal issues with sexual harassment and whatnot. But I will correct somebody. And if I see somebody's uncomfortable, I will speak up if it's okay with that person. I will get permission. I'll if it's happening in the moment and I can see that somebody's uncomfortable, male or female, I will speak up. And because I don't like to see people, talk down to or referred to or whatever. And I don't do it in an aggressive way. I'm very professional about it. But, I'm more like, if I can't do it in the moment, I'll pull the person aside, and say, hey, do you want me to go to bat for you? And get their permission. And then, speak to whoever, and that's not always just a leadership thing. I'm not bagging on the leaders, but a good leader will in the moment either correct themselves or correct somebody else. And I think that some of the management and leadership, they need training on it, and because they're humans. I'm not saying sensitivity training, just reminders, growth training,
more cognizance. Because I think they would be inclined to speak up if they recognized it, right? If their situational awareness was such that they were attuned to that kind of thing. Because no one's just lets people be dicks to each other, right? I at least, I hope not. Not good ones. But I mean, I would hope that at least that if they saw it, they would say something, but they have to see it, right? They have to notice it. And we are attuned to those kind of things. We're attuned to if someone did do the crowd, we're like, hey, not everyone here is comfortable with that. Can you amend? Not everyone is aware though. But again, it comes down to what Cam said. How well do you know your people? How well do you know your room?
When it comes bad, it sounds better coming from the leader. If they catch it, in the moment, obviously, if they don't know what's going on, that's different. But if they're made aware of it, coming from that person, I think they need to do more of that management and senior leadership and not make it a, shame on you, but just redirect.
Yeah. And I will say this because of Erica's, and I guess mine now, I'm a recovering sales engineer, guys. But I will say, I do think that there is a lot more of that on the sales side because it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of like that get it done perspective, right? But at the same time, the leadership, so many leaders forget that leadership isn't, you didn't get there because you had the most sales or because you made the best product. You're literally there to lead people. You're there to find what makes them tick, what motivates them, what makes them get irked, what triggers them, all these things, right? You're there to lead a team, not to be the best in the company. And I think that that's a big thing because when I was an analyst, when I was a security analyst back in the day, I had a manager come on board. And I remember one of my lunch breaks, I went out and I was like, Mom, she is being so rude to me. She doesn't even know what I do. She's dumb. You know what I mean? I'm like, she can't do this job. And she's going to tell me how to do this job. And I will never forget my mom telling me, she's like, sweetie, her job isn't to do your job. Her job is to be there for you, to help you have what you need to do your job. So if she's giving you feedback, it's not her being an a-hole. It's because you need it, right? You're growing. And she's like, I think people misunderstand the fact that leaders need to be able to do the job of the people they're leading. Yes, that helps. But real leaders are the ones that are there for the people, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what you should be there for as a leader.
I want to acknowledge Naomi's question. Can you pull that up? Because I have an answer to that. And you're right, Amber. I agree.
First of all, she says she's under 40. Great, me too, but getting closer every day. But at mid-level management, she's gotten sweetie and it's uncomfortable. First of all, raise your hand if you've ever been sweetied. Oh, Lord. I got a sweetie and I was like, don't call me sweetie. I'm not your fucking sweetie.
Yeah. And she says, I try to correct one-on-one. What do you think about age gaps or generational gaps? That's what I want to answer. First of all, you have to nip it in the butt when it happens. And even if a woman does it to you, you have to correct a woman because women, will go, hey, babe, or dear, or sweetie, or darling. And we shouldn't be doing that either because then it's inviting others to do it. And then you can't be okay with a woman doing it and not okay with a man doing it. So the generational age gaps, that's a load of crap. That is no reason or excuse to use like a sweetie or dear, and that you need to take that factor out of your mind because they know better,
But we
especially at
have to
mid-level
remember
and above.
as it is. It is like as it's like that kind of social economics thing again, right? Because some people were raised in a different time where you just didn't do those
Correct.
things. Some people were raised where you did do those things. So I do think, like, if I had, and we're not doing takeaways yet, but I will say this is the thing, right? There's a reason it's called a cliche. So when people say lead by example, I do think that when there are problems within a team, I immediately look to leadership to say, how is it being addressed? Like, because problems are either usually nipped in the bud or
Yep.
or at the same time they're handled over time strategically. But either way, if it's coming to the point where other employees are starting to notice that it's a problem,
Yep.
whether they want to believe it or not, right? Like even at Teach Kids Tech and stuff, like when there's issues, it's ultimately me that has to fix that, right? Because it's a
Yep.
culture thing. It's a day-to-day operational thing. It's strategic. It's all the things. So I do think it starts from the top. So
Yeah, you
And
have to go to that, and I was gonna say that you have to go to the top. I'm not saying go above people, but if you can't correct it with that person one-on-one, you gotta go follow the the chain of command on it.
yeah. And that takes us beautifully into our next segment. Thank you both.
Mhm.
So, what steps could organizations or managers or even team leaders take to foster a culture of empowerment? And again, not just inclusivity, not just like labeling us correctly
Mhm.
and gendering us correctly, but like honestly, empowerment, making us feel empowered to contribute new ideas, to ask critical questions, to constructively criticize our teammates when we see, when we have valid questions on why things are being done a certain way. What's your opinion?
I will say,
It's go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say ask and speak up. I think a lot of this, and I've been at different companies and different verticals here in this industry, and some leaders just kind of assume. And I mean that with the sense of they kind of get their own analytical take on reserving and watching what people are doing, watching the metrics, but they don't actually sit down and say, "What are your goals this year? How can I help you achieve them?" Like
Mhm.
I don't think I've been asked that in 3 years, probably. And it's no slight to any of the management team I've had, but it's almost because some of us carry ourselves, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but when you carry yourself well, people assume you've got it. They don't know that
Mhm.
there's not insecurities or that you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't know if I'm going to make it in my career, right? Because you're not broadcasting it, right? But there are times where a leader should sit down and actually sit with their team and get to know their team and actually ask. Because that's I think the
Yeah.
problem is they just assume that things are fine. There's no complaints. I don't need to do anything differently. Why would I rock the boat when nobody needs it? But it's like,
That's a reactive stance, though. This is
right,
versus a
Yep.
proactive,
right,
like,
right,
are things actually okay? You know?
right. Exactly.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I think leaders need to stop waiting till annual reviews and saying this is all the things you need to improve on, but also really give them good feedback. And they only do it once a year. A lot of companies, not all companies, but that does start from the top. One thing that I did see at a previous employer where I did not have a good time there, it was just a very rough employment for me, was they put out these surveys and they basically hounded us and hounded us and hounded us to do the surveys. And because people don't do them because they think they're crap. So I think that, or a lot of people think they're crap, doing these surveys and really kind of getting into the behavioral side of it and like, just the psychological side of it, understanding who that employee is, taking that, applying it to the organization overall, because there is no one size fits all, and give constructive feedback. Because in sales, it is very different. Where you sell a $10 million deal, and then the next day they're like, "Where's the other $10 million deal?" Right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how, like Amber said, have check-ins, whether it's weekly, every 2 weeks, or even monthly or quarterly, just outside of your performance. Hey, how can we support you? But actually, not just ask, actually do it. And there are companies that are getting a lot better at this. I'm seeing it a lot. The current company that I work for, they have us doing like this. It's like, it's a lot of psychology behind it. It's just understanding who I am on a
Mhm.
good day, who I am on a bad day, and how my employer can work with me.
Yeah.
And it's a great process. I've never done this, and it's a smaller company that I work for, and I want to give kudos to them. Quorum Cyber, who I work for, this understanding who I am on a good day and a bad day is going to help my leaders and my leadership work, help me.
And I love that, because then if you are having a bad day, or like if you respond the wrong way, it's not, God, Erica's such a B. It's like, well, that doesn't sound on brand for Erica. Like maybe she's
I like that.
going through some, maybe there's other factors. Like I'll go figure out what happened, but like, I was going to say, for me, this manifests in two ways. One, psychological safety, right? I need to be able to be vulnerable sometimes, because we are so deathly afraid as women of looking inadequate to the job we already feel like we don't deserve, and already being told we're like the most junior on the team, or the most inexperienced on the team, or whatever, that we're like, I need this training, I need this information, and we're afraid to ask for it because then we look stupid. So I need to be able to go to my manager, even in closed doors, and say, I need this supplemental stuff to be successful in my job. And like, it's going to benefit me, it's going to benefit you, it's going to benefit the customer, right? Win-win-win situation. But if you just feel like you can't say those things, or like you're going to be docked for it, or they're not going to take your request seriously, then you're bringing up stuff that you need and you're being invalidated, and you just go along feeling inadequate. You stop raising your hand, you stop participating in class, all that stuff. And then your performance drops. Like, why is your performance dropping? You're like, gee, I wonder. But the second thing I'm going to say, piggybacking off of Erica's, is if you do have those one-to-ones with your employees, keep all of them. Don't like, oh, you're my rock star, so I'm just going to, do we need to have our one-to-one this month? Do you need me? Do you have anything you need from me? Okay, great. I'm just going to cancel it. I'll talk to, and like, I know that you're doing it all. I know you're doing great. I know you're doing all right. It's like, that's not fair to that employee.
Yes.
On one hand, we're like, oh, great, I'm doing so good, he doesn't need to talk to me. But it's like, you're missing out on that time and that feedback. And it shouldn't have to wait till annual reviews, because then it's too late, right? Why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? I would have fixed it.
And here's the other flip side to that, right? So this is what I was going to say. So I'm glad you segued it perfectly. When your manager says, like, we're good, I know you're good, you're a rock star, that's an opportunity for you as a manager to get in there and say, you're crushing it. Like, I've noticed that you're doing this. Like, would you consider this? Like adding more responsibility, right? Like adding, like almost kind of getting in front of them, because there's a lot of people that are just content with being where they are. That's fine. We need that in the world. But at the same time, if you're trying to encourage growth on your team and you want to see rock stars become like superstar rock stars, give them
grow more rock stars from the median people.
You notice, like, Meryl's really good at purple teaming, right? But I also notice leadership qualities in her. I wonder if she's open to being on like a leadership path or track, right? And it's like, maybe I can use this one-on-one time to ask her about, like, you're crushing it right now. What's next for you, right? Like, it's good to understand motivators and drivers behind everybody's psyche that's on your team. Like, you should know your team at their worst, at their best, what motivates them. But what really motivates them, like to jumpstart the next part of their career. That to me is so true. We miss those opportunities every day when we go, you're good, you got it, perfect, see ya. Like, versus like,
I love that.
Like the next CEO, you know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
And I know that there's a lot of people on a lot of people's plates, but I love that you just brought that up. I agree with you. And April Frost, reach out to me after this podcast. I'll give you my number. We'll talk about what your question. I have some advice for you.
We'll address it at the end. We're coming to you, April. But did you have another point you wanted to say, Erica, piggybacking off that?
No, I didn't want to. I was trying not to interrupt Amber, because she's right. Like, a lot of the times those rock stars don't get that either.
And that's how you bring like those medium performers up to being rock stars, right? Like, you focus on growing your people, not just like depending on them to show up ready-made. But also, a lot of you don't consider succession planning. You don't want to be CISO forever. You want to be CISO for maybe the next 10 years. Then you're going to need someone to hand the torch over to. Start grooming people. Like, I had a CISO, my first CISO ever, who was like growing interns constantly. And he's like, that's because when you get your next job, you're so talented when you inevitably get your next job. Or when I promote you, I need someone to pull from. I need a talent of a pool of talent to pull from to replace you, or I'm up shit creek without a paddle, and I don't want to be in that position. So, he was literally looking at who's going to replace me when I retire, and who's going to replace them, and who's going to replace them, and how many people do we need 3 years from now, and start grooming them today. And it was the most forward-thinking man I've ever met.
Great. Yeah.
So
leaders are never just content with just being, static. I feel like great leaders are always achieving and striving for more anyway. And in order to do that, it's the succession planning. So it's like, I know for me, I want so much more, right? So I'm like, okay, how do I get all these things in my life up and running? For example, TKT. I don't want to be, forever running this thing from an operational standpoint. One day I want to see the next generation come in and run this. I want to help build that next generation, right?
Yeah.
Because I know it's not going to be for me forever. I'm a human, right? I will probably, knowing my brain, everybody who knows me, I'll have 1,000 things going on at any given point in time from now until the end. And
We
I'm just,
love you.
well, that's what I'm saying. But here's the other thing though, is like, as a leader, you think about, it's kind of like a family, right? Like you want your kids to grow up and be strong, and like eventually they're going to leave the nest. Your job is to get them prepared and ready for that, right? But you don't just stop your life because you have kids. You keep your life going. And at the same time, you're like, I'm moving up a step, you're coming up a step. I'm moving up another step, you're coming up another step, right? You're always thinking about the next. You're not just
You would never just leave your kids alone and be like, hey, you need anything? Good in there? Okay, great. Like, I haven't heard from you for hours. You must be fine.
Yeah.
Well, that goes into what we talked about the player coach on the sales side. You cannot be a sales leader and have your own accounts and compete with your team. And I don't want to dive into that because we talked about it, on a previous episode. You cannot, I feel you cannot be a leader and also be a salesperson at the same time. That doesn't mean that you stop selling. Jump in with your reps and help them sell. Go cold call. Some of the best managers I've seen in sales, they'll get on the phone and be like, hey, prospecting, or do call blitz, because that keeps them so still in the business and it has the experience of what their reps are going through. So I think the player coach thing, in my opinion, just does not work, but I know why companies do it.
Yeah.
It's like Ron Swanson famously once said, don't half-ass two things, whole ass one thing. And I think that's a big thing, right? So that's my favorite thing, right? Because you have to kind of dive in. And when you're a leader, and this is just my firm belief, when you're a leader, you literally jump in without any sense of like yourself. You put your team first because you are the leader. Just like it's like we do as parents, right? I'm not going to say moms because dads are out there doing it too. As a parent, you literally can't think of yourself first, right? You have to make sure that everyone else is taken care of. You almost eat last, right? It's like the joke I always say, like Instagram eats first when I take pictures of food and stuff. But that's what I'm saying, like everything comes before you because you're representing a greater whole, like a greater thing that everyone's working towards, and you're leading everyone to it. So you can't, it's hard to do that while you're fending for yourself.
Being a manager should be exhausting. My mom was a phenomenal manager, and she was frequently like, and so was Andy Grant, my old manager at Zoom, constantly calendar full of one-to-ones. Like you couldn't get 5 minutes with this man. It was like the president of the United States. Like he was constantly like checking in with other stakeholders on other teams, leading his teams, people leading, ops checking in, stuff like that. So we actually had like an ops lead, and then he was like our people lead. So if we had operational concerns, questions, tools, stuff like that, the manager could leap into the weeds with us and help us up. But then he was taking care of us from the like people and the growth perspective. And like, sometimes it's two jobs, but like, if you have a ton of free time as a manager, you're not managing effectively. Like it should never be like that. All right. We're going to take
Scott in there.
Yeah. We're going to take a few comments because we've got some juicy ones. And then we're going to go into final takeaways because this is going to be a long one. I didn't know this topic would go this long. So to get to Miss April 1st, she says, and I'm not going to put it up because, again, it's big, but what do you suggest when there are ongoing microaggressions in that HR requires mandatory training on that, but then you go to HR and they literally tell you, oh, you must have misunderstood. Why don't you just go and talk to them? Advice from Miss April.
I have a whole slew of advice.
HR person. I've never seen that before. Have them reach out to us. Again, that's like going to the police and them saying, actually, you should just deal with the robber in your house. So, that's like their job. So that's a different one we can take offline. I feel like I do think that you can also, if in this situation, I'm not one to go to HR for a lot of things because it gets really hairy and tricky and all that stuff. So it kind of gets dramatic for no reason, but put things in writing, make it an email, right? Always CYA, especially if so it's on record.
Yeah, I document my butt off. What you have to realize is HR is there to protect the company. They're not necessarily there to protect you. Right. So they're there to like limit the company's liability and their suability and things like that. So they're going to try and find the most PC correct, kumbaya, everybody just go back to getting along answer they possibly can. They're not necessarily your advocate. So you need to find an advocate, an ally. And if you don't have one, or if it's a very small org, like we don't even have HR at my company, it's just going to kind of be dicey and different for everybody. I would say document, military mindset, lowest rung first, chain of command, like knock that shit off. I don't like it. If they don't hear you nicely, use your mean mom voice. And if they still don't hear you, start documenting it. That's all you can do.
Yeah. That's why I said, April, reach out to me. We'll talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Siobhan says improvement should be an open conversation during one-to-ones. At the same time, it's an opportunity to speak about improvement goals and get positive feedback on both ends. Sorry, there's no question there. We just agree.
Yeah.
Last question. OMG. What can I do to help move ambiguous feedback to actionable? For example, I'd like to know when I've exhibited the behavior that the feedback is about. Example, you are confrontational. That's not very easy to act or improve upon.
I literally have been waiting for this one. So I love that because this is an opportunity for you to, there's a way to do this as a leader that's respected, because you can't just be like, who wrote this, right? Like, especially if it's anonymous, you can say things to your team like, there have been some things, and I would welcome the opportunity to understand examples in which I've done this so that I can reflect on that and change behavior next time. You have to basically be willing to eat the shit pie. Okay. Like you have to basically be willing to say, you know what? Cause like if I younger me were to get that, I'd be like, what do you mean I'm confrontational? You know what I mean? Like I'd be like,
not confrontational.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes you have to go, okay, you know what? It's not about me right now. It's about somebody expressing how they feel that I've affected them. And even if you're like unaware, like you had oh my gosh, I had no idea that I affected you that way. I'm so sorry. Or if this is anonymous, just say, you know what? I've gotten some anonymous tips. I love it. I love that feedback. Keep it coming because it helps us all grow and get closer together. I would welcome the opportunity to understand what things have happened or which way I've done that. No, well, because some people won't be like, because if it's a one-on-one, then they're going to know if they're trying to say anonymous.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to tell her.
I want to be in the staff meeting last week. You were I know it was Ted now. Thank you, Ted.
Right. But what ways are you fostering feedback? Are you having like a suggestion jar? Is it an email? Is it a one-on-one? Whatever method it is, let people know, like Meryl said, that they are safe to give feedback. Like if you're a person that is maybe a little bit more standoffish, maybe change the way that you're going about that and show them like, hey, I'm here to be humble. I'm here to listen. How can I change this? I want to do it, not because I want to change this because you told me to, because I want everyone on my team to feel comfortable. So please, it helps me to understand like what I've done or things that I've done as examples so I can change it.
Right. I would say I'm good at talking about those situations very objectively. Like I stick to the facts. So I'm like, okay, great. If someone told me straight to my face, you're confrontational, I'd be like, awesome. Appreciate that. You've just pointed out a problem. So you've given me a problem. I would love a solution. Or like, great, what are the action steps associated with the outcome you would like to see? Right. So you're getting like, thank you. Let's not just talk about the problem that there's no women in cyber. Let's actually give solutions. Right. So like, I would say, great. What do you want me to do about that? Or if they're the kind of person who's very straightforward, it's like, great. What are my stop, start, continues on that topic?
But not everybody knows that. I'm going to say this because you're a very strong person and not everybody is as strong. So for example, I had a CEO that was like, you guys are all coming to me with problems. Nobody's got a solution. I'm like, well, now we're all terrified of you. Now we're all afraid of you. So we're not going to even say anything. Right. So it's like, at that point, you do have to kind of still humble yourself from like this. I'm very confident, like tell me, because I'm ready for whatever you're going to give me. Because sometimes people see that as like aggression in itself. And they're like, oh my God, like never mind. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like, because sometimes you go to people and you don't know what the solution is. You're like, I'm just telling you that it's a problem. Like think about it like kids. When your kids are coming, they're like, I hate this. Like you can't be like, tell me reasons why you hate it or what would make it better, right? Some people just really don't like it. And as a leader, you have to understand like, okay, is it because it made you feel triggered? Is it because it was this? Is it because it was that? And then you kind of have to self-reflect and be like, okay, maybe I'm used to doing it this way. They're not taking it the way that I'm hoping that they would. So how can I adjust that to meet whatever it is? Because I do think a lot of it is ego, right? For leaders. And I've been there before. I've seen it on both ends of it. And at some point you have to be willing to go, they're not attacking me as a person. They're just saying what their limitations and boundaries are for interacting with other people. I just happen to be the target of that discussion right now, right?
Golden quote, they're not attacking me as a person. They're expressing what their boundaries and limitations are for interacting with me in this context.
Yeah. So.
And I think it goes back to what Erica said, know your people. Like someone saw someone give me feedback once and it was super blunt because I was like, I'm a blunt person. Don't dance around it. Don't be subtle. I won't understand. Just give it to me. And they're like, oh my gosh, do you want me to say something? That was uncalled for. I was like, no. I asked them to do that. Like, that's how I prefer to receive my feedback. Like, don't worry. So it comes down to how well you know your people. Like Erica said, good day, bad day. All right. We are going to go ahead and move into final takeaways. Thank you for bearing with us through this long but very, very fun episode. More fun than I've had in a minute. So ladies, final takeaways on overcoming barriers to empowerment, building an empowerment fostered culture, things managers or people can do. Anything you've got from the episode that you want to recap, go. I will call on Erica first.
Oh.
Or Amber. Amber wants to go first.
Amber wants to go.
Usually we're doing what I'm doing right now. I was trying to avoid it. Didn't work.
I know. I'm just going to go. So I think for leaders, it's important to know, like my takeaway is, because we have a lot of people that have, phoned in, so to speak, on this, asking for help as a leader. I would say just know that there is always room for self-improvement. And just because you're a leader does not mean you are the most perfect human on the planet with no problems and no room for improvement. Always be humble and know that even though you've got your shit down, some people might not respond in the way that you think that they will. So just know that you're open to feedback. So be open to feedback and know that there's always room for improvement, for communication, for leadership styles, for all of that. That's my favorite.
I love that. And to build on that, I think organizations need to offer their leadership mentoring, like the ability to be mentored, because you offer your employees and direct reports mentorship. I think leaders need that as well. I have a coach and a mentor now because I'm trying to level up in my career and, move to the higher levels and echelons of my career and entrepreneurship. So always having somebody, as a mentor or just, even like somebody to talk to, bounce things off. But I also think that companies can give some of the things that you give the direct reports, like who are not in management, offer those same things to leaders. Because often you get in your career and you continue to kill it and you're a great leader, but there's still maybe some things hanging out there that you need to fix. And it's all about, I think, self-development. So maybe offer that, self-development or growth or whatever it is. Do that for your leaders as well. Send them to a retreat. I don't know what the answer is for that, but offer those things because that you're putting a lot on your leadership and they're pushing that down to their people, but they might be needing that help as well. So that's my final takeaway is they're just as human as their direct reports. I really do think that we need to, with all the stress, especially in cyber, give that to our leaders as well, especially like CISOs.
Train the
those
lead the
because
leader.
a lot of those, yeah.
Check in with your people. Leaders check in with their managers. Managers check in with your people. Yes. All right. I've got a few because I couldn't have just one because why not? First of all, see it to be it. Women need to see it to be it. So to all those women who are like, I've already been through that, I'm not going to help you. It is your job as the women who have come before to help the women who come after. And if you're one of the women who's not helping, I'm going to hunt you down and dox you. So FYI. The other thing I love, the number one thing I love that came from this episode is what Erica was talking about. Get to know your people. And I'm going to take this back to the military. In the military, at officer training school, we were taught you need to get to know your people. As the LT, that's your only job. No one respects your authority or leadership. You're the bottom of the totem pole on the leadership rung. So your E7s have been in the military twice as long as you. So it's your job to simply get to know them, get to know them as people, get to know their families, get to know their values, get to know how they act. Know who your jokesters are, know who your down to business people are, know all these things. And when you recommend something to them, recommend that they get their GED. Don't do it because it looks good as a metric on you. I had 7 people get their GED this year. Do it because that's going to get them into a bachelor program and that's going to get them to officer training school one day. Do it to help them improve. Don't do it as a metric or a pat on the back for you. And in the military, we're also taught as the leader, it's pretty much your job to suck on the fails. That's going to come down to your head and give away the wins. That's on your team.
Exactly.
So it sucks, but that's what you do.
That's what you do.
That's how it goes.
You need to know that before you decide to get into leadership. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
My third one is going to be prepare for your one-to-ones. Prepare for your one-to-ones. If you're the subordinate or you're the superior, prepare for the one-to-ones. That should never be the meeting where you're walking in. What do you want to talk about today? Anything going on? I prepare for those the most. I have a plan. I have an agenda. I have goals. I have outcomes. I need a yes on this. I need to know this. Prepare for those the most. Those are the most. That's your meeting. That's how you drive your career. And if you're not driving your career, someone else is going to drive it off a cliff for you. So don't let that happen. I thrived even under bad managers because I managed up. So if you got to do that, or if you need lessons on doing that, contact me immediately. And the last thing I'm going to say is what Stacey Champagne said. Be the problem. You've got Amber over here who's Switzerland, and that works for her. You've got Erica over here who will have crucial conversations when she needs to, and also ask for permission to advocate for you. And then you've got people like me who's like, hi, it's me. I'm the problem and I'm happy about it. I will be your problem. If I need to be your problem, I'll be your problem. So take up space. Advocate for yourself, because someone will always reach across those ley lines to help you. You are your number one best advocates. What I tell my kids, we don't know what's going on inside your head and your heart. Only you do. And only you can get what you need from the people around you to solve that. That's what I hope for you.
That was great. I love that, ladies. You're awesome.
Yes.
Okay. This has been another fun episode of the Cyber Queens. We're so happy you spent your Friday with us. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. We hope you have great holidays coming up. And we will see you all next week for yet another episode.
Bye.
The one time we get a bye correct. I love it.